Pete Hegseth is an incredible choice for Secretary of Defense. I've known him for over a decade. We've served together in the Army National Guard. He was a field grade officer who's deployed multiple times, 2 Bronze Stars. He's got incredible academic credentials. He went to Princeton and to Harvard. He's got a great aptitude for the geopolitical environment around the world. And also, he cares about our nation's veterans. Both him and I served as the executive directors for Concerned Veterans for America. He was my predecessor. He has a deep care for our nation's vets, and that starts with the Department of Defense. He subscribes wholeheartedly to President Trump's agenda of spreading peace and prosperity around the world. And I believe that Pete Hegseth will command the respect of our allies and of our enemies, and he'll restore respect to the Department of Defense that we've been lacking for a long time. So I think that Pete Hegseth is an incredible choice to be our next Secretary of Defense.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again on the State of Freedom.
Today we have Mark Lucas from the Article 3 Project joining us again. We will be talking with him about the organization's involvement in election integrity matters in the swing states, the lame duck attempts at shenanigans in Washington, and his views on Trump's latest appointments. Before we talk to Mark, let me read the scripture of the day. It is Proverbs chapter 23, verses 4 through 5. And it says, "Don't compare yourself to the rich. Surrender your selfish ambition and evaluate them properly. For no sooner do you start counting your wealth than it sprouts wings and flies away like an eagle in the sky, here today, gone tomorrow." And I was reading this morning, and I just was thinking, comparison really is the thief of joy. And whether we're comparing status or wealth or looks or health or anything else, comparison can bring us undue pride, or it can bring us a sense of not being good enough. And neither is the posture that the Lord wants for us. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 tells us to be thankful in all things because this is God's will for us in Christ Jesus. So here we are. It's November, the season of Thanksgiving for Americans, and we have so much to be thankful for. Allow me this opportunity to just caution us all to guard our hearts and minds against comparison in this Thanksgiving season. Instead, let us take those thoughts of comparison, because they will come, and just turn them into opportunities to thank God for who He is, what He's done in our lives, and the blessings and the opportunities He's given us, because He is absolutely good, and we need to just be in a posture of thanksgiving.
Yeah. Comparison is the thief of joy, Danielle. There's no question about that. And God, we have to remember that we're all miraculously and wonderfully made, and we're all absolutely unique. There is no Chris Alexander in the world. There's not another Danielle. There's not another Mark Lucas. We are all absolutely unique, and we should recognize that and derive our self-esteem from our relationship with Christ, which is a daily relationship, just like our relationships with anybody else. If we want to have a good, healthy relationship, we have to cultivate it. We have to seek Him out. We have to spend time with Him. And that's what we all should be doing. But as you said at the outset, Mark Lucas, and I got to tell you, but before we get into this, I just want to tell you that every time I read Mark's background, I feel like he needs to be serving in the Trump administration somewhere. It's like you're an Army Ranger, Bronze Star, Operation Enduring Freedom. Just a great patriotic background and a man who just truly loves his country. Mark Lucas, what a pleasure to have you with us, sir.
Thank you for having me on today.
The last time we had you on, y'all and the Article 3 Project were knee-deep in litigation on election integrity, I believe in Arizona and some other swing states, really hammering them. Is that still a focus of the Article 3 Project now that at least the presidential election is over?
We definitely need to prioritize election reform. I think we've seen this in Arizona, in Nevada, in Pennsylvania. these swing states who take days or not, or maybe weeks to count votes. The American people really want to return to a transparent election system that's timely. We should know the results of our election on election night. Yeah. I think Florida is a perfect example. They have millions and millions of voters, more than Nevada, more than Arizona, and they were able to quickly report the election results. So we believe in transparency. We believe in voter ID. We believe in all these things that will restore confidence in our elections for all the American people.
Yeah, and in fact, isn't that the whole purpose of the machines, Mark? Isn't that one of the selling points for the machines? So we don't have to wait for the results? It's like, what's the point of having the machines if we're waiting a week, 2, 3 weeks to get results?
And we also saw a major problem with non-citizens trying to vote.
Yeah.
It was all of these states, secretaries of state, in all these swing states, these battlefield states where they're trying to allow non-citizens on their voting rolls. And the Article 3 project had several action alerts telling people to contact these states' governors, their secretaries of state, saying remove non-citizens from their voting rolls. It's pretty simple. I think it's common sense. We want Americans to vote in American elections.
Plain and simple.
Plain and simple. And it's not brain. And I have to ask you one last thing on this before Danielle gets into her next question. What is your reaction? And I kind of know what it is already, but what is your reaction to the idea that the governor of Virginia would have to sue the Biden administration in order to get people who clearly are not legally on the voter rolls, cannot vote, not citizens, off of the rolls? Well, I mean, it just seems like that when I saw that, even for this administration, I was just disappointed and a little bit surprised at that, Mark.
It was very clear at that point that the Biden administration was going to do anything to try to win the election, and that included allowing non-citizens on the voting rolls. There's no other explanation for that lawsuit. Unfortunately, well, in Virginia, it was closer than usual in a presidential cycle. But in other states, President Trump truly made the election too big to rig. He was able to run on such a great agenda that not only did he win the Electoral College, but he won the popular vote. And essentially, he drove up the margin so big in states where they couldn't allow lawyers to decide the election results.
Yeah, and they shouldn't be. They absolutely shouldn't be. I'm hoping that we will see what he's been talking about, what a lot of his folks are talking about, which is Election Day is a national holiday, paper ballots, hand counted in the local precincts, smaller precincts, all of that, because at the end of the day, it's very clear that the machines were put in to install candidates, not to make our elections more secure.
And look what the left has taken away from us. I love voting on Election Day. I just love the tradition. It's really a good testament to our freedoms here in the United States. And I served in Afghanistan in 2010, and we had to secure some elections. And you just saw that people were in fear of voting because of violence. They were fearful that their votes didn't count. They had really not that much trust in their election system. We saw that in Iraq as well. And the left has made Election Day, election season. And this was a year where I actually voted early, and it pained me to do so, but I wanted to bank my vote early to ensure it was counted, because these leftists all across the country, particularly in Arizona, where if you look at the last midterm election, they were printing the ballots in formats that wouldn't be read by machines. They weren't staffing in states like Pennsylvania accordingly to be able to support them. So look at what the left has taken away from us. But fortunately, there was people like the Trump campaign who worked very hard to chase ballots, to encourage early voting. And that's what ultimately led to our success, I believe. But again, the left ruins everything.
Yeah.
And they've ruined Election Day.
They did. Well, speaking of the left ruining everything and their desire to ruin everything, part of the reason Mike Davis founded the Article 3 project was to help get constitutionalist judges appointed. And we see that Schumer and Pocahontas, our friend Elizabeth Warren, want to push through 40 judicial appointments in the lame duck session. How are y'all involved in that, and what's the strategy there?
Yeah, so the lame duck session is the day after Election Day when Congress returns. I think most of them are returning this week, all the way into the inauguration. And so it's a very critical time. A lot of people get caught up in the celebrations of who won, and they're looking at the transition, which those are all really good things. But we are in a very perilous time. Like you mentioned, Elizabeth Warren had written in Time magazine saying that Chuck Schumer and Senate Democrats have to get to work and work relentlessly to confirm as many judges and regulators as possible before Donald Trump is inaugurated. So essentially what she's saying is, we don't want to listen to the American people. We don't want to listen to the election results. We want to leverage this time while we still have power to get as many lifetime appointments confirmed. We think that's very problematic. So Mike Davis, myself, the Article 3 Project, we're really returning to our core mission, which is to support constitutionalist judges. And we will work tirelessly to defeat these radical leftist judicial nominations between now and when President Trump is inaugurated.
Yeah.
And Mark, can the Republicans, the Republicans aren't known for unity, honestly, especially in the legislature, but can't the Republicans just not show up for the votes and not have quorum and just tank the whole thing?
Well, Republicans can grind the Senate to a halt. They can use different procedural tools to do that. And what the Article 3 Project is doing, we have our Action Center, which you can go to a3paction.com, and we have an alert there where you can contact both your United States senators. You can email them, you can call them, you can light them up on social media and let them know that they need to grind the Senate to a halt.
Yeah, that's a great call to action you have there, Mark. Senator Warren needs to spend more time, confirming her Indian lineage and less time trying to rush through. And this is just another perfect example, Mark, of the complete, as you said, disregard that they really have for the will of the American people. Just another example. But it is so profoundly consequential because, as you know, judges have lifetime appointments, federal judges. And this will affect generations to come. And so I'm so happy that y'all are involved in that because it's a massively important issue. Let me ask you about another one. Speaking of illicit conduct on the part of the Biden administration and their cohorts, General Mark Milley, Biden's former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, allegedly, promised to warn China if Trump had tactical intentions against that country. I don't know whether he actually did that or what he actually did, but I think this is another very good example of the kind of treasonous behavior that we see in this administration. Can you talk to us about that issue with Milley and what you would recommend as consequences to him?
I'll say that nobody is above the law. And General Mark Milley, if he broke the law, he should be held accountable. But if he didn't, then I don't see any reason why General Mark Milley would fear being brought back on the active duty, being court-martialed, and given the opportunity to clear his name. So I'll say what the Democrats have said for the last 2 years: nobody is above the law. And Mark Milley should answer some very serious questions about what he said to China, the timing of it, because they have very dire consequences. And for me, I was just a lowly major, just a field grade officer. If I did anything that would alert the enemy of our intentions, you can guarantee I would be in prison right now.
Yeah.
It is such, to me, it is just so stark to look at. And yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It's like there has to be some consequence because if for no other reason, well, as you said, Mark, he should come in and just clear his name because right now there's a real stain on it.
And these military generals need to understand they don't serve the DOD. They don't serve that institution. They don't serve their long-held personal foreign policy beliefs. They serve at the pleasure of the President of the United States. And President Trump won an overwhelming landslide, and the American people support Donald Trump's agenda. which, by the way, has been remarkable with what he did during his first term to bring peace around the globe.
Yeah.
I was able to see Donald Trump's policy on the Korean Peninsula. I volunteered to go to South Korea at the height of the crisis between the United States and Kim Jong-un. And I saw how President Trump, by opening a dialogue, completely changed the complexion of the Korean Peninsula. And this is not me saying this. This is the former South Korean president, Moon Jae-in. He said that President Trump deserved the Nobel Peace Prize for what he did in Korea.
We need to make the Nobel Peace Prize great again. It hasn't been for a while.
Well said.
Well, Mark, I want to pick up on this idea of no one being above the law, because we've seen a lot of activist judges in the last number of years not ruling with the rule of law, but ruling instead on maybe the behest of their political affiliations or their people who pull the strings behind the scenes.
I'm excited to share a fantastic opportunity for State of Freedom listeners who are interested in investing in precious metals or even starting a home-based business in the precious metals industry. Metal Stacks is a precious metals collectors club where you can buy your metals at the best prices on the market, actual dealer cost. They are beating the big sites. They have no credit card fees and no minimums. If you're just interested in purchasing metals at a great price, visit metalstacks.com/dwalker. Get to shopping. That helps me out. I get the commission. You can also refer people to Metal Stacks for an additional income. If you're interested in learning about the referral business aspect of Metal Stacks, email me directly at Danielle@freedomstate.us for more information.
Does the Article 3 project, or do you think there's room, maybe it's not the purview of your organization, but should there be some consequences for these judges who are really strafing outside the lines of the actual rule of law outside of their job?
These judges really need to support the Constitution. They need to apply the law equally. And if they are doing things that are unethical, if they're breaking the law, then they need to be held accountable. And we also look at all of the attorneys across the country that we believe have been conspiring against the rights of President Trump. You've got Letitia James in New York. You have Alvin Bragg in Manhattan. You have Fani Willis and her boyfriend Nathan Wade in Fulton County. You have Jack Smith in Washington. All of these people appear to have been conspiring against the rights of President Trump, and there needs to be consequences. The American people need to have faith in the Department of Justice. We need people to understand that everybody's going to be treated equally under the law. That's what our founding fathers intended. And again, nobody is above the law. To go back to Jack Smith real quick, he said that his prosecution of Donald Trump had nothing to do with politics. Yet the day after the election, it was leaked from the DOJ that Jack Smith was going to be shutting down his office. If politics had nothing to do with it, then why is he shutting down his office the day after the election?
Yeah. Do you expect an increase in the lawfare against Trump and his team? I know I saw, Bannon, they're not letting go of Bannon quite yet. I know they're trying to bankrupt Rudy Giuliani beyond, I don't even know how you bankrupt someone so much for no reason. Do you think that they're just going to keep grinding through that until
it's going to be hard for them to do that? I think they'll do anything in their power to slow down the success of a second Trump administration. So we have to be prepared for that. We have Judge Merchan in New York, who's supposed to sentence President Trump at the end of the month. You have Letitia James, who after the election came out with a very bold statement saying that she was going to fight President Trump every step of the way. You also have governors in blue states like Illinois and New York and California who said that they would obstruct Trump's immigration policy. So I expect the Democrats to maybe take it easy for just a little bit, but to use a military phrase, they're going to consolidate and they're going to reorganize. That's what we do in the military after a major battle. We move off of the objective, we consolidate our people and our resources, and we reorganize in order to continue the mission.
Yeah.
I believe that they're going to come back with a vengeance. We've already seen Senator Warren saying that she's going to try to confirm as many judges as possible, along with Chuck Schumer. We see her advocating against President Trump's Secretary of Defense nominee. So I expect there to be a very big battle. And we have 2 years, essentially, before the midterm election to get as much work done as possible. So I think that the Democrats will use every tool at their disposal. But with Donald Trump and with his new DOJ, we'll hopefully bring accountability to these bad actors.
Yeah. We can certainly expect, Mark, some very intense, vicious political battles, but you're not expecting the kind of personal, the prosecutions against Trump, the convening of these committees to try to impeach him, all of the things that he went through before that I wonder how anybody can even survive that. Obviously, that will not have that complexion, hopefully, in this term.
I don't think so. And what we're going to see is a big messaging effort from Democrats, which we're already seeing, about President Trump weaponizing his DOJ against his political opponents.
I mean, I hope he does. I hope he does.
Which is the same exact thing that President Biden's been doing since day one. So I think they're going to be fighting a messaging war, trying to maybe convince some weak-kneed Republicans in Congress and in the DOJ not to take these actions. But what we've seen early on with President Trump during his transition, he is appointing very good, loyal people who understand the DOJ, who understand the rule of law, who are loyal, and who will do what's right for the American people.
Yeah. That's the difference between the Biden admin weaponizing the DOJ and Trump weaponizing the DOJ. He doesn't actually need to do anything except follow the rule of law, and all those crooks are going to be finding their way into jail soon.
Yeah, he doesn't have to create crimes against any of them, does he? Let's talk for a minute, Mark, about the appointments. I know you're excited about the Secretary of Defense appointment, Pete Hegseth. Tell us about Pete and why that's a solid choice for Secretary of Defense.
Pete Hegseth is an incredible choice for Secretary of Defense. I've known him for over a decade. We've served together in the Army National Guard. He was a field grade officer who's deployed multiple times, 2 Bronze Stars. He's got incredible academic credentials. He went to Princeton and to Harvard. He's got a great aptitude for the geopolitical environment around the world. And also, he cares about our nation's veterans. Both him and I served as the executive directors for Concerned Veterans for America. He was my predecessor. He has a deep care for our nation's vets, and that starts with the Department of Defense. He subscribes wholeheartedly to President Trump's agenda of spreading peace and prosperity around the world. And I believe that Pete Hegseth will command the respect of our allies and of our enemies, and he'll restore respect to the Department of Defense that we've been lacking for a long time. So I think that Pete Hegseth is an incredible choice to be our next Secretary of Defense.
Do you think Pete is attuned to the political correctness, the absolute lunacy, and all of the gender orientations and everything that's gone into the military now? Is he attuned to that? And is he going to be focused on trying to rid the military of that garbage?
Pete Hegseth is a warfighter first, and he's going to be strictly focused on what do we do to make the most lethal warfighting force in the world. And that's going to be his number one priority. So DEI, political correctness, none of that matters when you're on a battlefield and when you're getting shot at. And Pete and I have done that. We understand what combat's like. We understand that the enemy doesn't care what our DEI quotas are. They only care about whether or not we are lethal. And Pete Hegseth is going to bring that warrior mindset back to the Pentagon. And one of the great things about Pete is he was never a general. He never worked in the defense industry. So you're seeing people in the military industrial establishment, they're just losing it because he cannot be controlled. He believes in Donald Trump. He believes in the American people. And as a warfighter, he is one of us. And he's always going to take care of the people that matter most. And those are the people in uniform.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds like it's a shot right across the bow of the military industrial complex, this choice.
He's also so human. My dad was reminding me when the announcement was made, he said, you remember when Pete came on to Fox during COVID. He was homeschooling his kids and he had his 45 on his hip. He struggled through it just like everybody else and was so honest about it. So I love that about him. I think he is a great pick. Any other appointments that you're excited about, or anybody on your wish list for any of the posts that have yet to be named?
Well, I know Mike Davis has been working really closely with the president's transition team, and we feel optimistic about his choices that will be coming up on the Department of Justice. Also, White House counsel Bill McGinley was just announced yesterday. He's an incredible person who's worked with the Article 3 project as our senior counsel. So I see some really good picks coming up. Tulsi Gabbard should be imminent. We have just an incredible bench of people, just great leaders, great conservatives who understand what the American people need. They're not creatures of Washington. And I believe that the second Trump administration is going to be hitting the ground running, and it's going to be very, very effective.
Yeah.
Mark, an idea that just popped into my mind as we were talking, and I have no idea if he'd even be interested in this, but for Elon Musk and Vivek's new Department of Government Efficiency, which is just a conservative dream, if they need a chief auditor, Joe Hoft, he was such a champion of President Trump. He has been targeted at every turn by the left for his honest, unvarnished version of the truth, reporting of the truth rather. And he was a corporate auditor at the highest level. So I think he would do a great job, because when you were talking about Pete and the Department of Defense, I was remembering in the first Trump administration, I had a friend who was working in the White House, and part of his job was to find inefficiencies in the Department of Defense. And they found something like between 20 and 40 separate vendors just for orange juice in the Department of Defense. Just orange juice. Can you imagine the billions of dollars we're wasting on orange juice at the Department of Defense, if that's just one example? So I think Joe would get to the bottom of that. He may crush me for saying that, but
I don't think so.
I'm really excited about this new Department of Government Efficiency, and having Elon Musk and Vivek on there is going to be incredible. It's going to be a new department, so I'm excited to see what they do. But we also understand it's a target-rich environment for government efficiency.
Yes,
They've got a lot of departments they can overhaul. And I'll say this as a military guy, as a veteran, I think we need to clean up the Department of Defense. I think we need to clean up our own house first and lead the way and show people that efficiency can be done, and it has to be done, because we are facing a major fiscal crisis in this country. We can't have these year-over-year deficits. It's probably one of the greatest national security threats. I remember when I came back home from Afghanistan in 2010, I think the national debt was close to $17 trillion. I used to say that was our number one national security threat. The world has changed extensively since then. But I do believe that we have to solve that problem. And Pete Hegseth, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, Vivek, they'll be the guys that can get it done.
Yeah. And I ultimately think this is a matter of changing the incentive structure inside of the government, because as long as the budget cycle is you spend it or you lose it, we're never going to get anywhere. And as long as it's, you have a job for life and just coast along until your retirement, we're not going to have people getting the job done.
We are so honored to be affiliate partners for General Michael Flynn's movie, Flynn, Deliver the Truth, Whatever the Cost. Support General Flynn and the State of Freedom by shopping the Flynn Movie Store directly from the button on our homepage at freedomstate.us or through our affiliate link, flynnmovie.com/TSOF podcast. On that site, you can purchase the DVD, which comes with a streaming link. You can pick up Flynn movie merchandise and get his complete 5GW book series.
And one other department we need to look at is the Department of Veterans Affairs. I worked with the President Trump administration in his first term when I was the executive director of Concerned Veterans for America. In 2016, Donald Trump had a 10-point plan to reform the VA. And one of my close friends, Darren Selnick, also a good friend of Pete Hegseth, he helped architect the Mission Act. He also negotiated with Congress, and he helped implement it. Darren Selnick is a guy who understands the VA inside and out. I believe he would make an incredible Secretary of the VA. And he's the type of guy that won't be a figurehead, won't just be an honorary figure. He will be able to go in from day one and fix that bureaucracy, because we need to bring accountability to the VA. We need to protect our whistleblowers who can come forward and bring good information to our leaders to be able to fix the VA. And we have to also give our veterans choice in their health care. And Darren Selnick understands better than most that we need to have choice because our veterans deserve it, and they deserve to have the best health care in the world. So I think Darren Selnick would be an incredible choice for VA Secretary.
Mark,
Awesome.
do you think, will there be accountability, or have you heard any rumblings of what accountability could look like for the COVID mandates on the military active duty and the way that honestly, and the veterans have suffered so much under this administration? I mean, they can't get health care. They can't get any support for mental health, for PTSD, just for stubbing their toe. They can't get help at the VA.
The COVID-19 mandate that was forced on our soldiers was one of the darkest periods, I believe, in our military's history. And I was attempted to be forced to take the COVID-19 vaccine. I fought it. I refused to take it, but they made it very hard on me. And I remember I had to be counseled by a lieutenant colonel on the reasons why I should take the COVID-19 vaccine. And then after my counseling, they forced me to watch a CDC video that I knew was filled with propaganda. We lost a lot of good service members because of the COVID-19 mandate. We had a lot of people that didn't refuse. They took the COVID-19 vaccine and they've had health issues ever since. I've heard from pilots who have had heart irregularities because of the vaccine. I believe that Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth will do what's right, and they will restore our veterans' rights and try to make it right for what the Biden administration did and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, because they supported the pharmaceutical companies. They supported tyranny, and Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth and the new leadership will support freedom. And I feel very, very badly for the people that were harmed by that vaccine. And I believe that we'll learn from that moving forward.
I'm so glad to hear that, because it is an issue that demands justice. We had a couple of soldiers on our podcast, Mark, who talked about their experience with that. And it is just, it's just absolutely abominable the way they were treated. I'm so glad that Pete and President Trump are sensitive to what they went through, and some kind of reparations and accountability are absolutely in order there. No question about it.
And don't forget about RFK Jr.
Yeah.
He's going to be such a great addition to the administration. And one of the problems with COVID-19 was, again, we were losing trust in our institutions. I remember as a private in basic training, they lined us up like cattle and they rolled our sleeves up and we went through a line and they jabbed us in each arm multiple times with all these vaccines. And I trusted them because I said, hey, I've joined the Army. They know what's best for me. They're going to take care of me. That was way back in 2003. And so now, if there are legitimate vaccines that could protect us overseas, we've lost a lot of trust in these institutions. So we're going to need people like RFK Jr., Pete Hegseth, Donald Trump to restore this trust with the young men and women who are entering our armed services or are on the sidelines and kind of debating whether or not they should enlist.
Yeah. I have a son who has talked about joining the Marine Corps. And I think my dad was a Marine, and my son is interested in joining the Marine Corps. And I can tell you right now, if there's a situation where he's being forced to take experimental vaccines or forced to be involved with some of the political correctness that you spoke about, this DEI, then I will discourage him from joining, sadly enough. So I'm so thankful that is going to, all those issues are going to be addressed. I have another question for you, a little more personal question, Mark. Now that the election is over, what are your plans? Your plans are to stick with the Article 3 project, keep doing your great work, or do you have a different trajectory in mind anytime in the near future?
My number one priority is being a great husband and a great father. And I know I can do that best here in Iowa, my home state. I'm going to stay with the Article 3 project. We're going to continue to support President Trump's agenda. We're going to try to confirm as many great judges as possible We're going to fight against lawfare, and we're going to also fight for election reform. And I love the United States of America. I'm so proud to be an American. I'm so proud to have served. But my number one job in life is to be a great husband and a great father. And I really mean that. I wish more people, especially in Washington, would understand that. It's so important for us as a country to have strong families. And that's going to be my number one focus. I've got 3 young kids. I love being their dad. I love being my wife's husband and raising this family.
That's so beautiful. Well, give us a few action items before you run off. I know you've got an action item that you mentioned already to help grind these judicial lame duck appointments or nominations to a halt at the Senate level. What else is on your list for people to do to help keep America moving in the right direction?
People can go to the article number 3 project.org. We have an action center, and we encourage people to leverage that action center to contact their United States senators and tell them to grind the Senate to a halt. Do not allow Chuck Schumer and Elizabeth Warren to confirm lifetime judges during the lame duck session.
Extremely important issue, no doubt. Mark Lucas, it's always a pleasure, sir. Thank you for your great work and your great service to our country, sir. We will be in touch.
Well, thank you. I love the State of Freedom. I love what you guys are doing. And you'll always have a friend at the Article 3 Project. So thank you for having me on.
That means a lot.
You're welcome here all the time, Mark. Just say the word.
Thanks for joining us today on the State of Freedom. Be sure and check out the show notes for this episode. You can always go there and find the calls to action and resources mentioned in the show, and you can find out more information about our advertisers there as well. If you want to learn more about us or support our work, visit freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit LACAG.org. We'll see you next time. God bless.